It's 9:06 p.m., Mountain Standard Time, and the air outside the studio is thin and cold, in that way Flagstaff gets after sunset, where the pines turn into dark pillars and the smell of sap hangs close to the ground. The thermometer bolted to our back door says 44 degrees. The wind that usually hisses through the ponderosas is quiet, like the trees are listening. I'm Jason Tate, and you're hearing me through what's left of KILN 103.9 FM, running on a battered diesel generator in a cinderblock room that rattles when the compressor kicks in. We're on low power, the backup antenna lashed to a rusty tower on a short ridge north of town, because the main mast up on Mount Eldon took a hit during the second night of the power dips and torched itself from the inside out. The transmitter says we're holding steady at a little over 300 watts. If the signal sounds thinner than you're used to, that's why. I took the compressor out of the chain so the hum from the generator won't pump up and down in your headphones. I've got a hand wound LED hanging over the console because the fluorescents flicker when the fridge cycles. The only sound in here is the fan and my shoes on this old linoleum. Somewhere down the hall, a hinge creaks every time the building shrinks with the temperature. No air conditioning, no music bed, no station IDs with cheerful voiceovers. Just me and the red light and the long stretch of silence where the city used to be. The city's fallen. Roads are gone. You've got 5 minutes and 1 backpack. What do you take? Let me know in the comments below. If you're hearing this in Winslow, if any of you in Holbrook or Lup or Bellamont still have a radio with enough juice, if the batteries you set aside for camping and never touched are now keeping this voice alive in your kitchen, I need you to stay with me for a few minutes. I am not going to tell you everything will be okay. I don't know that. What I can do is tell you what I saw, what I heard, and what people I trust told me before the phones went quiet. I can tell you what to do tonight and what to try tomorrow at first light. I can tell you how to keep a small group warm when the heat cuts, how to keep water safe when the taps spit air, and how to keep the wrong signals out of your head when the sky starts to sing again. The timestamp burned into my memory is 9:17 p.m. on Thursday. That was the moment everything bent. The NOAA radio that sits on the rack to my left chirped the same way it does for a flash flood or a dust storm, a tiny beep that usually means an annoyed engineer is running a test. Then every phone in the room lit up with a push alert that only said, "Seek shelter, no county, no event code," just those 2 words. All the streetlights along Route 66 blinked twice. The little desk fan stuttered like it swallowed air. The audio meters didn't spike, but I felt the tone before I heard it, like something laid a huge hand across the roof and pressed down. It was not thunder. It was steady. The coffee in my cup made rings. I stepped outside into the alley and looked east, because that's where the first color showed. Not fire, but a band of dirty white across the horizon toward the meteor crater. And then the white turned gold. Then red. Not flame red. Not neon or brake light red. It was the color you get behind your eyes if you press them too hard. And then it pulsed. A friend of mine named Mike, who does night maintenance at the visitor center out by the crater, told me on Wednesday he was hearing things through the windbreaks he couldn't put words to, like a crowd whispering behind drywall, but lower. He's practical. He sharpens his own mower blades and knows which breaker feeds which hallway by memory. He said crows were circling west of the rim at dawn and then stopping mid-flight like a hand had paused them and set them back down. He said his walkie stopped working inside the gift shop unless he faced north. He laughed about it because that's what you do with a detail that rubs wrong. He said he'd bring me a photo of the weird cloud that parked above the rim after sunset, a perfect circle that never moved even when the wind stiffened. He did not bring the photo. His wife, Carla, drove in from Parks yesterday morning and handed me his vest. She had the look I've seen on people waiting outside operating rooms, eyes on something you can't see. She said the vest was hanging on the hook where he always leaves it, and his keys were in the pocket, and his boots were lined up under the bench like a person had put them there the slow way, heel against the wall, toe to the tile. No note. The clipboard in his truck had Thursday's checklist half-finished in neat block letters. The engine was cool. The driver's door was unlocked. The radio was tuned to static. It matters that you know which roads sealed first because it tells you where they didn't want you to drive. The Arizona Department of Transportation signs on I-40 flashed all lanes closed eastbound at the Cosnino exit within 20 minutes of the tone, and the state troopers stacked their cars across the lanes like giant teeth. Bellamont on-ramps closed next. Then, the big lit sign at Butler lit up with detour arrows pointing away from town. A volunteer from the fire district told me later he saw 2 green trucks with no numbers and long antennas park under the viaduct at Country Club and smash the cameras mounted on the light poles with a telescoping rod. Not because they were broken, but because they were still streaming. People tried to get around the closures by cutting south through Mormon Lake and coming up I-17. But Camp Navajo rolled out their Humvees and redirected everyone back down toward Munns Park and told anyone who slowed down that the guard had declared a soft cordon for public safety. They used that phrase a lot that first night, public safety, like an answer that fits every question. That's usually how you know the list of real answers is short. From the roof of the station you can see the dark lump of the San Francisco peaks when the moon is up. You could also see the wrong shimmer on the east horizon, a ripple that showed even through the haze of wood stove smoke in town. After the second pulse, the birds that roost under the eaves of the old warehouse across the alley came boiling out and then turned as one and dove under the edge of the roof and stayed there, bunched together like a cloth pushed into a bottle. The dog 3 houses down made one sound and then nothing. The train stopped blowing their horns at the crossing. If you know this town at night, you know the freight horns. They thread through everything. When they go, you feel like a tooth fell out of your jaw. At 9:40, the EAS relay threw a header across our board, the long string of letters and numbers that tell you who is sending what, but it was clipped, like someone had stripped the voice track. The part where the synthesized voice usually says, "Attention Flagstaff and Coconino County," was a flat line. Then a tone, not the usual 2-tone, a steadier one, like what you hear in a hospital when a monitor connects. I switched to the emergency channel to monitor. It did the same thing again at 9:52 and again at 10:03, as if on a schedule designed to say we are here without telling you anything else. If that happens again while you're listening, write the time down. Pattern matters. The dark loves when we guess. By 10:30 p.m., the cell network started to fall apart. The last text I sent that went through clean was to a friend who works nights at Lowell Observatory. I asked if their sensors had caught anything before the shimmer. He sent 4 words and a number. Multiple returns, no altitude. He followed with a line that looked like gibberish to me, but I recognized the short code for a radar sweep and a cluster over a fixed point east of town. If you know how radar works, you know you get returns off things with surfaces that bounce. You do not get multiple returns from a fixed spot unless the air itself is stacking on itself, or unless something is there that isn't behaving like a single object. He didn't reply to anything else I sent all night. I tried calling the guard desk at the observatory. It rang and then went hard cut, no click, no voicemail. In the morning, when I drove past there, the gate arm was snapped off and the little window was starred like someone pushed their hand through it and then thought better of going in. What I saw from the edge of town yesterday afternoon, when the sun was low and the light on the cinder hills turns everything orange, is not something I can argue with myself about. This is not rumor. I parked on a turnout off Loop Road with the hood pointing east and turned the key halfway to run, but not start, so I could spin the dial on the old AM radio without drawing down the battery. The static was clear, no lightning, no storm. The crater was a smear of brightness against the flat line of the land, and in that brightness, this is the part that refuses to sit still in my head. I saw motion, like you see in water when a fish turns near the surface, but there was no water. The land around the rim shivered and dipped and rolled, swallowed its own shadow and spit it back out in a new shape. And if I had to call it something, I would say it looked like someone was smoothing a sheet over a big shape underneath, lifting and pressing and lifting, and then the light rose slow and dropped slow like a breathing chest. I aimed the radio toward the glow, because radios are nothing but ears, and the static formed a chord, a thread of sound that climbed up the band in small steps, and when it got to a place almost no one listens, down near 520 kilohertz, it held. Not a voice, not quite. A pattern of long and short bars like a child tapping a table with a spoon, except it never slipped, never rushed or dragged, as if the spoon belonged to a metronome, not a child. I wrote them down in a line. I don't know what they say. I set the paper next to my coffee, and then I set a book over it, because the pulses started to sync with my heartbeat, and I didn't like what that did to my thinking. If you heard a similar pattern, and you tried to count it, and the numbers started to feel like they were counting you instead of you counting them, unplug the radio, step outside, look at a thing with sun on it, and wait until your breath stops trying to match the line of the sound. This is one of those times when not knowing what something says is better than letting it rent space in your head and move the furniture around. People came in early yesterday morning with news from the east side. A mechanic named Elena Yazzie from Loip drove to the back door of the station in a chalk-dusted Tacoma with the hood lashed down by a ratchet strap. She looked like she had not slept, and she had that smell of cold and dust that sticks to people who have been outside all night. She said the light in the crater is not just light. She said the sagebrush on the flats nearest the rim has turned white like it froze, except it did not thaw and slump at first light. It stayed white, and when she touched it with a stick, the leaves crumbled without heat or wet, and the stick had a taste on it she could tell through her gloves, like pennies left in your mouth too long. She said they heard voices on a road crew radio that wasn't powered at the time, voices saying names wrong, stretching vowels, as if whatever was talking was coming up from a long way down under the words to meet us. She gave me a bag of bolts and a bottle of water they had boiled twice and poured through a t-shirt. She said if anyone from town makes it out in a small car, tell them the cattle guard at mile 7 on the dirt road past the old tower is crooked now. Tell them to slow down there. You do not lose people to the thing you know is in front of you. You lose them to the thing your tired brain forgets to honor with your attention. Slow down. Look at the ground. Keep 4 hands on the problem if you have them. We have not heard a clear voice from city offices since the last message from the county emergency manager at 6:12 a.m. Friday. The message was a map with 4 shaded blocks and a line that said, "Stay out of the shaded area." 2 hours later, the same message went out again with a bigger shaded area. 4 hours after that, The map showed the entire city limits shaded, and the words, "Stay sheltered. Do not self-evacuate. More information to come." There was no more information. At noon that day, the sheriff's office stopped answering radio checks on the public scanner frequencies. When I called the number they gave us for media coordination, I got a recording that said mailbox full. When I drove by the substation on Beaver Street, the lot was empty except for a single cruiser with the driver's door open and the light bar turned sideways like someone had tried to rip it off and gave up when it didn't break clean. A man named Harris from Holbrook left me a nylon bag of 9-volt batteries at the back door with a note that said, "Tell the others this might help," and underneath a short line that made me stop chewing my sandwich. He said they drove up to the old rubble south of the crater and watched through binoculars, because that's what people do when the thing they are afraid of is fixed in place. They go as close as they dare and then glass the edge of it and hope that distance is the only safety they need. He said the ground is wrong there. Said power meters swing even when nothing draws power. Said he watched a metal culvert rise an inch and settle back because the earth under it stretched like a muscle. He said someone in his group, a kid from Joseph City named Miguel, started smiling even though nothing in front of him was funny. And when the kid smiled, the wrongness in the smile didn't sit in his lips or his eyes, but in the shape between them. And Harris slapped him, not hard, and said, "Say your sister's name right now." The boy blinked 3 times, and then said Letty in a voice like his own again, and started to cry, because he did not know why he had smiled. If that sounds too strange to carry, I am telling it anyway, because the bag of batteries was real in my hand, and the handwriting was the kind that comes from a man who has filled out bills of lading his whole life. He is not the kind to make up a story when he needs you to trust a simple thing like a battery. We have people who think with wires and people who think with maps. The wire thinker I leaned on most today is a guy named Ruben, who used to do contract work on the comm towers near Belmont. He came into the station this morning with a spool of cokes over his shoulder and told me to stop trying to throw so much signal east. "They're listening for lighthouses," he said. "Don't be one." He turned our antenna 10 degrees south and then 10 more, so our main lobe throws toward Munns Park and the scrub beyond, and he rewired a switch so I can key down on a lower carrier at the quarter hour in case anyone out there is counting on a tick to know I'm still alive. When he was done, he told me a thing I didn't want to hear, but I'm passing on because it fits the rest. He said a friend of his at the FAA facility in Albuquerque called him for a quick consult before their phones went dark and said their scopes saw returns over the crater that were neither transponder pings nor ground clutter. The term she used was uncooperative traffic, but she kept saying the word like it had a different shape in her mouth. Like the trouble wasn't that the targets wouldn't cooperate, but that the word traffic meant less and less the longer she watched it. She said the returns changed size in ways that didn't match any craft she'd ever tracked and bled into each other without losing their edge, as if a school of fish decided to be one fish for a heartbeat, and then many again. She said she could feel the hair on her arms lift every time one of the returns moved in a curve instead of a straight line, and the feeling came before the movement on the screen, which means the machine did not own the timing anymore. The map thinker who helped me today is a retired lieutenant colonel named Avery, who lives down the hill near Lake Mary Road. He has a quiet watch and the posture of a man who learned how to sleep sitting on boxes. He spread a county atlas across our break room table and drew a dozen small circles with an old golf pencil. He said, "If you think of the crater as a power plant we gave to something that didn't know it needed one until it touched our lines, you have to ask what it wants to do with the power. You don't feed just to glow. You feed to extend yourself. He showed me where he would build new nodes if his job was to push influence through rock and wire without showing his face above ground. The circles overlapped the main substation near Winona and the fiber hub north of town and the old concrete telecom bunker by the tracks that most of us forgot about because it has a blank door that never opens. He put his pencil on the paper and looked at the wall and said a thing I have been hearing in different mouths since Friday. This isn't a crash site, it's a base camp. The way he said it had no heat in it, just a tired math that lets a man lay options side by side and rub out the ones that waste time. If you need the short version because your flashlight is dying, the thing in the crater landed on purpose. It is still landing in a way, because landing is not just about stopping. It is about locking yourself to the place you stopped. It is learning our map by moving through our lines. It is using our power to pull more of itself through. It is not a single object. It is a field that can stand up and move like a body when it wants to. It changes things near it in ways that don't burn or freeze by our rules. It makes sounds that climb into your head if you let them. It knows what a broadcast is. It may be leaving notes inside that empty tone we keep hearing. Our people in town are not answering, not because they won't, but because something between them and us eats the words before they leave their mouths. And the little bits that slip past don't sound like them, because the shape of the silence between words changed. Now the part that is not about fear, the part that lets you get through tonight. If you are in a house with more people than outlets, gather in one room. Bodies make heat. Sweaters are better than space heaters. Heaters eat fuel, and fuel brings noise, and noise draws attention. Boil water even if it smells fine. If you don't have fuel, you can rig a small rocket stove from 3 bricks and a coffee can on the porch. If you don't know what that is, picture a can with holes near the bottom and a small chimney, and feed it small, not big. Boil for at least a minute at this elevation. If you have bleach that is plain and unscented, 2 drops per quart of clear water, 4 if it's cloudy, stir, wait half an hour, and then smell it. If it smells faintly of bleach, it's okay. If you taste metal in your water and have been near the East Flats today, let the water sit in a clear bottle in sunlight for a few hours, and then pour it off the top and leave the last inch in the bottle. It is a small thing. It will make you feel like you are doing a job for yourself. Small jobs are tickets out of panic. Do not stand at your window and stare east. Your eyes will try to make sense of the light. They will not. Your head will make patterns from the wrong parts and leave you with a feeling that does not fit your house. Put dark paper over east-facing windows if it helps. If you hear a tone that makes your jaw ache, turn your radio to 146.520 on a handheld if you have one, or 462.675 if you have a GMRS set, and listen for a short check from anyone calling themselves Mile Marker. That's the name the volunteer groups out by Cosnino picked. They are doing a sweep at the top of each hour, as long as their car alternators can keep up with the draw. If you don't have any of those radios, tune your AM set to 820 at the half hour. I'll throw a carrier there for 20 seconds with no voice so you know I'm still here. And if the sky noise is low, you may hear the thump when I lift my finger off the key. Old radios can hear that thump like a heartbeat at the edge of a wall. If you need light to cook, use a red lens on your headlamp or a bandana pulled over it. White light paints your location on fences that weren't there last week. If you own a drone, do not fly it east of the railroad tracks. They see your drone before you do. A man in Donny Park told me the thing that makes him want to leave right now isn't the glow, but the way he can feel someone in the field pushing back on his controller before he even puts the sticks forward. That is not a feeling I want you to learn. A small win from today. A shop teacher from Williams named Teresa showed up with a box of hand-crank radios she bought years ago for a class about emergency power. She said they sat on a shelf because her students rolled their eyes. She opened the boxes and they all worked. She passed them out to 3 families who arrived from the east with kids in the back seats, wrapped in quilts, and no batteries left for their flashlights. Those kids heard my voice through a plastic box with a little solar panel on top and fell asleep on a rug in our lobby with their shoes still on because they didn't want anyone to take them away. If you feel stupid for that lump in your throat, don't. I cried behind the vending machine where the camera can't see me. I am not proud that I hid. I am just telling you the truth, because I always hated when radio voices pretended they were marble statues who never shook. My hands shake every time that low tone comes back. It makes me think of when my dad took me to see the turbines at the dam and the floor thrummed, and you felt small in a kind way. The way that makes you say, "Thank you." This is not that kind of small. This small makes you go quiet in your mouth and loud in your skull. Another win, if only a tiny one. We got the old windmill behind the station turning again this afternoon. The bearings screamed until Reuben packed them with grease meant for truck axles, and the vanes shook, and then the tail caught a trickle of wind that still sneaks between the trees, and the blades turned slow, and the pump rod walked in its rusty circle, and we got 1.5 gallons of brown water up out of the old well. It cleared after we ran it for 20 minutes, and now there is a drip into a bucket in the back hall that makes a sound I haven't heard in years. If you have an old thing that turns, turn it. The delicate stuff is not our friend now. The things a hand can fix with a wrench and a rag, those are the ones that still want to sit on our side of the table. The hard part to say out loud, there are people missing from the middle of our sentences, not just the ones who drove east to see the edge and did not turn around. People who left the kettle on and stepped onto their porch and never picked up the mail they dropped when the first tone rolled the air. A teacher from South Beaver named Angela wrote her lesson plan with real chalk on a real board at 3:30 Thursday and set her chalk on the tray, so it printed a little white half moon. Her neighbor found it like that at noon Friday, with the door unlocked and the lamp on. No struggle, no broken glass, no spilled coffee. Just a television paused on a weather map with a little cartoon sun that never rises. We can live with grief. We know the shape of that inside a body. What we don't know how to hold is the empty where even grief can't find a corner to push against. If you need a thing to do for that kind of hole, I have one. Write their names big on paper and tape them to the inside of your front door, so you see them when you go outside and see them again when you come back in. Names keep people tied to rooms. The light east of town does not get to keep them unmoored. It doesn't get that. Not from us. I promised earlier I would pass on anything I hear from people with higher badges and deeper files. I got one message today that I believe came from someone inside the loop that sits on top of other loops. It came through on 5.330 megahertz, which used to be a shared channel, and the voice was flat like it was red, but it had a small catch when it said the word civilian in a way that made me think of a person, not a recording. The message said this: soft emergency measures are in place around the greater Flagstaff area. The eastern approaches are to be considered contaminated in a non-biological sense. Do not approach the rim. Do not attempt to transmit toward the anomaly with directional equipment. Ground is not stable within a 2-mile radius of the crater. All movement orders are outbound only. No inbound corridors authorized. The phrase non-biological sense is doing a lot of work in that message. If you are trying to translate it into normal talk, your body won't catch a germ, but the things that carry your thoughts may. I wish there were a clean way to say that. There isn't. This is the best I can do without throwing big words that make you roll your eyes. If you want the bit the military doesn't say, I'll give you what Avery told me after he folded up his atlas. His best guess, and he said the words best guess like a man laying down his cards, is that whatever we're dealing with isn't the ship. This is the tent they pitched to make the ground into a ship. He said, if you wanted to move yourself through a place that doesn't like you, you change the place first. You make the ground answer to your clocks. You set up more clocks. You pull on the lines under the dirt until they hum the way you like. And if you wanted to talk to the things that live here, you wouldn't use a language. You'd use pressure and rhythm and light that climbs up the wrong part of their ears and opens a hatch behind their thoughts. He said, if you're wondering why there aren't jets overhead or press conferences on every screen or convoys everywhere, it's because the people who hold those keys are trying to work a math problem that doesn't share a page with the book they studied. He said some of them are smart enough to know that throwing bigger rocks doesn't fix a river that turned around and ran uphill. I will give you the names of 3 people so this doesn't feel like it's all shadows. A woman named Maya Torres from Winslow came with her brother's 2 kids in the back seat and 2 half-empty gas cans and asked me if the city would be open by Sunday because her mother is on oxygen and her backup tank is in a closet downtown. I told her the truth and then told her everything I know about tapping a car battery for power and where to get a cheap inverter from the bottom shelf of the hardware store if the front shelves are empty. She wrote it all down, nodding, and then she told me a thing I want you to hold, because it made me stand up straighter. She said she drove past a line of cars, stopped at the Clay Springs exit, and one man stood next to his pickup with the hood open, and his wife was in the passenger seat, with her face in her hands. And the man held up a sign he had torn from a box and written on with a marker, "Need water." Maya pulled over, and while she poured from her jug, he reached into a bag and handed her 2 cans of Vienna sausages and said, "For the kids." And then he took 1 swallow of water and poured the rest into his radiator because steam was kicking under his hood. She had never met him. He had nothing to trade but food kids like. She drove away crying for a new reason. There is still a world under this one where people take care of each other. That world did not go out when the lights did. A second name, an older man named Reverend Cole from a small church near 2 Guns, walked in with a coil of speaker wire and said, "I figure you need this more than we need the bass in our hymns right now." He smiled a tired smile that you could balance a book on, the kind that has been practiced under roofs where leaks are patched with cookie sheets. He told me about an old woman in his congregation named Betty who knows how to make a water filter from sand and cloth and charcoal in a plastic bottle, and that tomorrow at noon, if the air is clean, he'll be showing anyone who wants to learn, 5 at a time, under the overhang behind the fellowship hall. If you go, bring a bottle and 2 paper towels and your patience. He's slow with his hands, but he's steady, and we will need steady more than fast before this is done. And a third, a quiet guy named Eddie Pruitt from Independence. Yes, that Independence, the one from back home in Missouri, who has been working at the rail yard here the past year, stood at the loading dock with a bag of bolts and asked if we had any use for them. I told him bolts are the only reason this place is still standing. He said he knows how to start a locomotive with a dead battery if you can roll it a few yards, And he laughed and said, "That's not going to be useful, is it?" And then he grew serious and told me he saw something on the east line that looked like a mirage on the tracks. Even though the air was cold, a heat wiggle without heat. And when he threw a handful of sand toward it, the grains slowed and turned like someone else's hand caught them and set them down. He did not go closer. He did not throw the second handful. He backed away and did not turn his back on the tracks until he had metal between him and the shimmer. If you find yourself in front of a thing that changes your rhythm without your permission, do what Eddie did. You don't need to know what it is. You only need to know it doesn't get to pace you. I have to say this part plain because I don't want some polished line to soften it and slide it past you. If the radios around you start to repeat names wrong, if you hear a version of this voice that tells you to go east for help, if a calm tone tells you a corridor is open to town for those with urgent needs, do not trust it. If there were a corridor, you would see convoys. You would smell diesel. You would hear helicopters. You would see people with reflective tape on their jackets, and the same puzzled, angry, tired on their faces you see in your mirror. The thing that talks with light and tone doesn't need those tools. It has a way to make you feel like the shortest path to safety is exactly the one you fear. We have a phrase we're leaning on in here. Verify in 3, move in 1. That means you need 3 separate truths before you put your boots on a road that points toward the place you are scared of. If you only have one, make tea, tie a knot in a rope, check your flashlight battery, and wait. Time is a tool, not just a weight. When the sun comes up, the tone in the air drops and people come out of doorways, and you can collect 2 more truths before you choose. About me, because I owe you that. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time since this began. My left eye twitches when the generator changes pitch. I moved the coffee pot closer to my elbow so I don't have to stand up and be in the dark beside the fridge. I keep a baseball bat by the door, even though a bat is a silly thing against a signal in your skull. I keep it because holding something heavy that belongs to me puts my feet back in my shoes. When the tone starts and the red glow on the horizon breathes, I put my hand on the bat and I say my own name out loud, like I'm answering roll in homeroom. It sounds stupid until you try it. Names are ropes. Throw yours to yourself. If you need exact times, I'll give you 3 to hang your clocks on. At midnight tonight, I will key a carrier on 103.9 for 15 seconds with no voice. It's nothing but a ping for those of you trying to count the hours and keep your people calm. At 12:15, I will crawl down the hall, click the old AM rig on, and throw a low-power carrier at 8:20 for 20 seconds. If it lands in your kitchen like a soft thud and you have to strain to hear it under the static, that means you're far, but not lost. At 1 a.m., if the generator and the fuel cooperate, I'll talk again on this frequency for 10 minutes, with anything that crossed my desk between now and then. If you wake at 3 o'clock and your heart is doing that quick step and your house is too quiet and you need a reason not to look east, put the radio on table and wait for the key thump at 3:15 on 8:20. I can't promise we won't drop for a minute if the diesel coughs, but if we go quiet longer than a song, give me your patience, and I'll use it to breathe. Morning work for those who like lists. Bleed your radiator if you hear gurgling. Check your chimney. Ash builds faster when stoves work harder. Clean the filter on your sink if you have one. A clogged filter lies to you and might as well be no filter at all. Walk your fence line in daylight even if you don't have animals. A fence keeps your mind in the yard. If you run a small store, pull your ice cream to the front and tell kids they can have one each before it melts. Because if the power is out, there is no reason to keep cold joy hidden in the back. If you have skills you use to put on resumes, nurse, electrician, teacher, write them on a sheet and tape it to your mailbox so neighbors know who can do what without knocking on 12 doors while the light is thin. If your skill is, I can sit with a baby so a mom can sleep, write that too. We're going to need that most of all. If you work with radios, stop transmitting toward the east with any kind of gain. Go omnidirectional or polar away from the glow. If you don't know what that means, it means don't put the long side of your antenna toward a thing that wants to catch it. Aim your curiosity west for a while. There are contacts out on the plateau who are still talking, low and careful, passing handshakes and weather and little inventories without saying where they are. If you hear the word cliff repeated 3 times and a long pause, that's a group near the big bend in the river saying they're safe and they're staying put. Don't ask them to say more. Don't throw your power where your thanks can go. Quiet is also a gift. It is 9:57 p.m. now, and I can hear the generator easing down a hair, which means the tank is feeling hollow on the bottom. I'll shut it down for 20 minutes after I drop the carrier at the top of the hour to let the engine rest, and to let myself sit on the floor and lean my head against the cabinet and count to 60 twice. Slow. So I remember this body belongs to me, and not to the tone. When we come back up, the lights may be dimmer. That's okay. We don't need bright. We need steady. If you need a sentence to put on your fridge, write this. We take turns holding the light. When yours gets heavy, set it down. Someone else will pick it up. When you can, pick it up for them. Before I go quiet for that short stretch, I'll leave you with this. A kid from Tuba City, named Aaron, came by with his aunt this afternoon with a box of screws and a bag of apples that somehow stayed cold all day, wrapped in towels in their trunk. He stood at the door with his hands jammed into the sleeves of a hoodie and looked past me down the hall at the bare floor and the wires and said, "It's weird, but I don't miss my phone." He didn't say it like a lesson. He said it like a surprise he found in his pocket. His aunt smiled without showing teeth and said, "He misses his grandmother." We all do. The grandparents, the teachers, the nurses, the ones who knew how to fix a split knuckle with a strip of clean cloth and a joke about being clumsy when you thought you'd die from a paper cut. If any of those people are in your house, thank them out loud. If they're a memory, say their names and tell their stories to the kids at breakfast, even if breakfast is crackers and peanut butter. Stories are rationed now. Share them slow. I'll be back at the top of the hour with the short carrier, and again at 1 with whatever I can gather in between. If you have to sleep, sleep. If you can't, sharpen a pencil and write a list. Lists keep teeth out of the walls of your head. Keep your lights low. Don't stare east. If you hear a voice that feels like a hand inside your thoughts pushing you toward the glow, put your hands on your knees and say your name. If there's someone next to you, say their name too, and then ask them to say yours. Names pull us back when the floor starts to tilt. This is Jason Tate, KILN 103.9 FM, low power somewhere west of the wrong light, asking you to breathe with me, slow in, slow out. We're still here. We're still saying the names. We're still learning the map of this new night. I'll throw the signal at midnight. I'll talk again at 1. Hold what you can. Let go of what you have to. We'll learn what tomorrow asks when the pines start to show their tips against that first strip of gray, and the birds, if they're willing, take their seats again on the crossbars, and try a small test sound to see if the air will carry it. If it does, we're still in it. If it doesn't, we'll try again the next hour. That's how you build a day now. One small test at a time, and then another, and then another, until it's dark again, and we count to 60 twice, together. It's 1:07 a.m., and the station feels smaller when the world outside is silent like this. The diesel's running again after that short cool down, but the tone of it has changed. There's a faint hitch every 20 or 30 seconds, like it's drawing in air that isn't quite right. I keep glancing at the fuel gauge, even though I already know it's low. If we're lucky, we've got 2, maybe 3 nights left before I have to start siphoning from the abandoned cars out front. The air outside is colder than it was at midnight. I opened the back door for just a second to dump some of the radiator water, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. Not wood smoke, not exhaust, but something clean in the wrong way, like new metal or stone that's been scraped. The horizon east of town is glowing again, but it's different tonight. It's sharper, almost like the light is passing through something before it reaches us. I stood in the doorway for as long as I dared, and noticed it was pulsing slower than before. It used to feel like a heartbeat. Now it's like breathing in the middle of sleep, slow, deep, with long pauses between. The space between those pulses feels heavy in my chest. I caught myself breathing in time with it, and had to step back and slam the door. About 45 minutes ago, I got a scratchy call over the low-power band from someone calling herself Dana, said she was outside Winslow on an old ranch property. She said she could see the same pulsing from her side, but her angle put her closer to the crater. She swears the light is climbing, not higher in the sky like a flare, but physically climbing up the walls of the crater, like it's coating the inside. She compared it to watching frost spread across a window, but in reverse. She also said something I can't stop thinking about. When the light fades between pulses, the stars above the crater are gone. Just gone. The rest of the night sky is clear, but that patch, it's like the stars have been wiped away. I've been thinking about what that means. If it's smoke, it should drift. If it's cloud, it should shift with the wind. If it's something else, then maybe it's not blocking the stars. Maybe it's replacing them. Or maybe we're looking at somewhere else entirely, for just those few seconds at a time. Earlier today, before the sun dipped, I took a drive out past the old gravel pit on the west side. I don't go far, fuel and eyes both being what they are these days, but I needed to check the repeater station there. On the way back, I saw 3 trucks pulled over by the service road, not broken down, just sitting there with all the drivers standing in the middle of the road facing east. I slowed down, and none of them turned to look at me. They weren't talking to each other, but they were all swaying a little, like grass in a slow wind. I didn't stop. I didn't want to know what they were seeing. There's a rumor making the rounds on the quiet channels that the crater isn't the only one now. Someone in Holbrook swears there's a depression forming in the ground north of town. Not nearly as big, but it's lit from below in the same wrong way. If that's true, then either whatever landed is moving, or more of them are coming down. No way to confirm yet. Every time someone gets close enough to send back proof, the transmission dies. Or the person stops talking halfway through their sentence and the line stays open but silent. If you're in range of this signal, you need to keep doing the basics. Low light, low noise, keep your group small and indoors after dark. And above all, if you see the glow getting brighter in your direction, put walls between yourself and it. Not windows, Not chain link. Something solid. I've been told by someone I trust that there's a reason the guard parked their armor in a ring facing outwards. Not because they're expecting something to rush out, but because whatever's inside that crater doesn't need to move to reach us. I'll keep the broadcast alive as long as there's fuel in the tank and power in the board. If you hear the signal drop, give me an hour before you assume the worst. The next pulse is coming. I can feel it before it hits. If it changes again, I'll tell you. For now, this is Jason Tate on 104.3 FM. Still west of the light. Still here. Stay low, stay small, and don't let the silence fool you. It's never empty. It's 1:41 a.m. now, and I'm still here under the red bulb with the board warm against my forearms, listening to the diesel cough every few minutes like it's trying to remember the rhythm we taught it. The building creaks when the wind shifts, and the wind is light, but it carries that new smell again, the one that isn't wood smoke or rain, something like cut copper and cold stone. The glow to the east is steady between pulses in a way it wasn't yesterday, and when it swells, you can feel it through the floor if you stand barefoot. I tested that once and decided to keep my boots on after dark. The stars above everything else are sharp now that the air's gone dry, but the patch over the crater is still wrong. When the pulse drops, the sky in that slice turns to a flat black circle where even the small stars disappear, like someone took a hole punch to the night. It's not cloud. Clouds move. This sits. It sits and dares you to keep staring. Don't. I'm Jason Tate, and this is Kiln 103.9 FM on the little antenna that didn't fry, west of the light and trying to stay that way. I said 104.3 once in a rush hours ago, and I'm not going to waste fuel explaining it beyond this. Sleep and fear untie small knots in your head. If you hear me trip again, trust the part of your brain that knows the map of this voice. I'm going to give you what I have and ask for your patience where I don't. That's the trade we have left. Truth for time. A man named Victor from Leup left a folded legal pad page in our back door this afternoon under the brick we use to keep the door from slamming. His handwriting looks like someone wrote invoices in a cold warehouse their whole life. He drew a shape of the crater and a line of fence and marked the places where trucks sat with their hoods up and nobody inside, 4 of them in a clean arc, like someone put a compass point on the rim and swung it. He wrote the times he saw the pulses and the times the cattle in the flats went quiet. The quiet lined up every time, with the long, slow part between pulses when the sky turns to that hole. He said he whistled once, a low 2-note thing his father used to call dogs, and the sound curved in front of him like it hit a hot road. He said his tongue tasted like pennies after. He wrote that and then underlined, "Don't whistle." I'm saying it to you because your mouth will want to test the air. Don't. Save your tests for the kind that don't put anything in you. I drove the short loop behind the station at dusk to keep the generator happy. Machines like to think you care. And I saw something at the bend where the alley meets the tracks I don't love. Lines of frost, neat as rows in a field, running north-south across the dirt even though the air wasn't that cold, and nothing else around them frozen. When I breathed on the nearest row, it didn't melt. It went dull. And then the dullness crawled a finger width along the line toward the tracks and stopped, like it was hungry, but tired. I dropped a bolt on it from my pocket, and the frost line shivered. I saved that bolt, and I'm not going to set it near the board. If you walk out in the morning and see frost where there shouldn't be, or in lines that look drawn, don't scuff it with your boot. Step wide. If it's on your porch, sweep it into a bucket with a plastic dustpan and set it in the sun and walk away. When you come back, if there's a slick at the bottom that smells like coin and rain with no rain in the sky, dump it in the dirt where nothing you love grows. It's just a guess, and a small one, but even guesses can save knuckles. We keep talking about roads because roads tell you what a place is doing behind the fences. I got eyes on Butler and Country Club and the I-40 frontage late afternoon. The closures eastbound are holding. Westbound lanes are open but thin. Half the cars are parked crooked with doors hanging open, and the other half are easy miles west with blankets over the windows. Camp Navajo has their trucks nose out inside the fence, and that means quick launch or quick leave. The row of unmarked green trucks has grown. 2 now have telescoping masts that feel wrong to look at, not because of what they are, steel with a dish and a box, but because when the glow swells, the dishes lean a hair without wind. If you have binoculars and the patience, you can see that lean. If you see it, put the binoculars down and look at your own hands until they stop trying to match the sway. A retired electric lineman named Chuck from Winona came by with a coil of number 10 and 2 rolls of black tape and handed me a list of what substations feed what. He's got 40 years of climbing in him, and he knows which fences wrap, which little forts. He traced with his finger from the big substation north of town to the feeder that used to push into downtown, and then to the switch yard near the fiber hut by the tracks. He said, "If the crater is a mouth, the lines we buried are straws. And if he were the one using them, he'd sit people with clipboards near our switches and wait for us to try to cut." He said, "Don't cut yet." He said the last time he saw a system behave like this was never. "It's not drawing like a storm," he said. "It's drawing like a man who got off a plane and tasted water in a desert." He said, "If your house still has power, you should unplug everything you don't need and run your fridge like it's a baby. Quick bursts, not a long pull." That's not because the grid is fragile, though it is now. It's because if something is drinking at the big table, you don't stand on your porch and wave a flag. I got a sheet of paper from a nurse named Lauren, who drove in from Twin Arrows with 3 bags of saline and eyes like sand. She wrote 4 lines that matter. First, the urgent care near 4th Street is dark and locked, and a handwritten sign says air unstable after midnight. I've never seen that phrase in a medical note in my life. Second, people who stood outside and watched the light for an hour straight without blinking. She underlined without blinking twice. Reported headache and an echo in their ears that didn't go away when they went indoors. Third, the white coating on the sage Elena told us about is spreading along the ground in narrow bands that map to the way the drainage runs, and when it reaches a puddle, it stops at the water line like it's thinking, and then flows around. Fourth, a little girl from the east side drew a picture of the crater ring with crayons and put the wrong colors in the right places, and when Lauren asked why she made the sky black in a circle, the girl said, "That part has no points. No stars. No points. Children don't look for poetry when they're tired. They say what they see." An old ham operator from Doney Park named Carl brought me a diagram for a quick and dirty listener net that runs on tiny bursts at set minutes. 7, 27, 47 past the hour. 3 words only. Alive, help, water, then the nearest cross street. No names, no numbers, no directions. If you have a little bubble pack radio that came in a pair from the sporting goods store, set it to 462.675 and listen at those times. If you have to say one of the words, keep your voice flat and repeat it once. If you don't have that, the AM carrier thump I send at 15 and 45 on 820 is your heartbeat check. I can't do more right now without throwing a lighthouse out there. And we learned this week, we aren't the only thing with eyes. There is a rumor about another hole north of Holbrook that isn't a hole so much as a sag, the shape of a shallow bowl. Someone scouted it from a distance at noon and said the air over it had a shimmer like heat even though the wind cut and no one had a jacket open. They saw small birds try to cross the middle of that sag and tumble a little and then dart right like a hand shooed them, then left, then right, like a maze you can't see. And then they cleared the far edge and settled on a fence all at once and shook themselves. I don't have a name on that one yet, and I don't want to start a fire with dry brush, so call it a thing to watch from far with your feet behind a car door. If you stand where it pulls, you're one of its bricks. The old observation I'm trying not to say out loud is this: the pulses are slower now and deeper, and that feels like settling. Like something got its anchor points in the right dirt and is easing weight onto them. The first days were all breath and flash and new sound, and now it's the long work you do when you've picked a house and you're moving in. I do not think it is leaving. I think this is the part where it starts to send lines of itself into the places under our feet that used to only carry our wires and our water. That doesn't mean the story is written. It means the story is written with us in it, not around us. That's not nothing. I'm tired in a way that sits in my jaw and not my eyes. I keep finding my hands on the same two knobs and turning them a hair left and a hair right and back again, even though the levels haven't moved in an hour. I caught myself whispering the names of my parents without meaning to, like I was checking a list I could not see. When that happens to you, when your mouth starts a list you didn't ask for, let it finish. Names are a rope over a river when the water starts to spin. I drank half a cup of cold coffee and held the baseball bat by the door for a minute, and it helped. Not because a bat fixes air or light, because it's heavy and mine, and it reminds me I'm in here, and the glow is out there, and my foot touches the floor that my father sanded in a house 2,000 miles away. And that means a line exists between where you end and it begins. If you need steps for the next few hours because your brain wants a task, I have some. Lay out what you'll eat for breakfast before you try to sleep. Take the top layer off the wood pile and set it inside so the morning doesn't start with cold hands. Write down the first 3 names you'll check on at first light, and then put the paper under your mug so you have to lift your cup to see them. Tape a cloth over east-facing windows if you live in a place where habit pulls your eyes to glass. If you have an old-fashioned alarm clock, wind it and set it for just after sunrise. If you don't, tell the person next to you you'll trade watches. They wake you at dawn. You let them sleep another hour and then wake them with the sound of water boiling. Boil water even if you have bottles. The act matters as much as the drink. If you own tools and don't know what to do with them, pull them out and set them where you can see them. People forget what they can fix because the last 10 years taught us to throw and replace. A crescent wrench on a table in the morning is a message from your past to the person you have to be at noon. If you have old manuals for anything, a generator, a mower, a radio, get them out and stack them where kids can flip them. Pictures of parts are toys now. That's not an insult. That's training in disguise. I want to tell you about a woman named June from Belmont, because what she did this afternoon changed the heat in this building. She came in with a shoebox of seeds she'd saved from years of backyard tomatoes and chilies and marigolds. She said she doesn't know what will grow now, or if the light will change the way plants behave. But she said marigolds don't care who's the boss, and they still try when the soil is mean. She set the box on the table and said anyone who comes in scared can take 1 envelope. She didn't say more. She didn't teach a class. She put a jar of dirt under the light and showed a little boy how to poke a finger in and tuck a seed to bed and pat it twice. The boy looked at her like she invented breakfast. If you have seeds, even old ones, put them in someone's hands. If nothing sprouts, we still did a thing that says tomorrow out loud. I've been avoiding the big words because big words can be a trick, a way to feel like the size of your sentence matches the size of the sky. But I need to say one simple sentence that is as big as it sounds. This is not just ours. I heard 2 clean sentences on 5.330 megahertz at dusk, with an accent I'd put somewhere near Yorkshire, and a second voice that could have been Ohio or Indiana. The first said, "We have a circle in the clouds where the stars wink off like a bad film splice," and the second said, "We're seeing the same dark patch over our sea." And then a third came through with a word I couldn't place, and a burst of tone smashed them both flat. That's all I got. 3 sentences, and proof that the thing we watch is teaching the same lesson somewhere else. That makes the world smaller in a way that helps, because it means we aren't a lone experiment on a plate. We're part of a pattern. Patterns can be mapped. Mapped things can be worked. You asked for the kind of notes insiders pass under doors. Here's one I wish I could vet twice, but I only have once. A man whose name I will not speak, because he still wears a badge you'd know, wrote on a napkin and slid it under the door with a coin to hold it down. He said a word I haven't used on air yet. Lensing. He said the black circle might be a lens that isn't a lens, not bending light because of gravity like we learned in school, but bending what light is saying to your head. He said if you stare at it long enough, you start to feel like maybe you should walk under it, because walking under it is like taking a deep breath. And wouldn't that be nice? To breathe new. He underlined this twice. Do not stand in a doorway and try to measure courage with your eyes. Courage is a morning job. Courage is walking to your neighbor with a thermos and asking if they have salt. What we know that holds until morning. The pulses have slowed and deepened. The patch of sky with no stars appears at the trough of the pulse and goes away when the glow climbs. Frost in lines is new. Vehicles left near the perimeter keep ending up parked neat without people. The guard faces out. The power dips line up with pulses less now. That means our grid is either isolated or it's learning how to carry a weight it didn't know. People who keep their heads down and their radios small are doing better than people who go outside and test the air with their ears. Birds still know. Watch birds. If they turn and tuck and cram themselves under eaves in the middle of the day, you go inside too. If they try a note at dawn, that's your green light to move slow and do the chores you wrote on your list. Before I shut the carrier off at 2, to let the generator cool and let this room breathe, I want to give you one more small piece that might feel silly, but helps. The old windmill that we greased into motion behind the station is ticking now in a way that doesn't line up with the pulse. That tick is a clock that's ours. If you have anything that clicks or ticks or drips, and you can set it to a rhythm you choose, metronome, leaky faucet, a bead on a string tapping the wall when a draft moves, set it, sit with it for a minute, and let your breathing match that instead of the sky. It's a small rebellion. Small rebellions build the bones for bigger ones. I'll throw the low carrier at 215 on 820 for those who need to hear the thump, and I'll bring this voice back up at 3 with any new lines on the map. If the diesel coughs hard and we drop, give me an hour to find a hose in a car with enough in the tank to share. If your eyes snap open before then, put your hand on your own chest and say your name once. and the name of the person next to you if you have one, and then the name of the person you miss. Names are how we keep the pieces tied together, while everything else tries to slide apart. This is Jason Tate on KILN 103.9 FM, low and west, counting to 60 twice and then twice again with you. Keep your lights small. Keep your radios quiet until the minute marks. Keep your hands busy with the work that pays you back at breakfast. Do not test the air with your ears. Do not stare at the hole where the stars should be. We are still here. We are learning. We will see what the light does at dawn, and we'll plan from there. It's 3:04 a.m., and the room feels heavier than it did an hour ago. The generator's tone has dropped half a pitch, which either means the fuel's thinning, or the air's doing something to the intake again. I keep one hand on the board and the other on the desk. Not because I think the desk will save me, but because I need to feel something that isn't moving. Out the east window, the glow has shifted. It's not brighter, but it's wider, like it's bleeding sideways along the horizon, eating into the dark without making the stars blink out in that perfect circle anymore. Now the missing stars are in a long oval, stretched north to south, and the edges shimmer like heat haze on asphalt. Around 2:20, I caught a fragment on the low band from someone who sounded like they were driving. Lots of wind noise, short sentences, breathless. Said they were north of Twin Arrows, and the guard lights there were gone. All of them. Claimed there were vehicles lined up on the shoulder. Not wrecked, just idling in place, headlights pointing toward the crater. And in the beams, something was moving. Not walking, not rolling. Said it was like watching a curtain ripple in a slow breeze, but it was on the ground. They cut out before I could ask if it was blocking the road or just sitting there. I've scanned the band 3 times since. Nothing. Closer to home, I went out back during the diesel cool-down, just to make sure the antenna lead wasn't icing over. No frost tonight, but the dirt had patterns in it. Long, thin ridges like something had been dragged over the ground. Not tire treads, no repeating grooves. I ran my boot over one, and it crumbled like dried clay. The smell off it was sharp and metallic, same as that frost Harris told us about. I didn't touch the others. I've been hearing faint clicks in the carrier during my own signal, like something's trying to match my broadcast. They're too regular to be static, too irregular to be a jam. If you've got a recorder running, play the last 10 minutes back slow and tell me if you hear them. Might be nothing. Might be the crater sending its own heartbeat through our lines. A man named Ellis from Doney Park left a message with one of the volunteers before dusk. He'd gone up to the ridge with a spotting scope. Said he could see, and I'm just repeating this. I haven't seen it myself. Structures inside the crater. Not solid buildings, but tall, spindly shapes leaning in toward the center, like tripods with too many legs. He swears they weren't there yesterday morning. Claims they were faintly lit from inside, like paper lanterns with something moving behind the skin. Said every time the pulse came, the shapes bent a little, like they were breathing in sync. The pulses themselves. They've changed again. Shorter now, and the low tone under them, the one you feel more than hear, is gaining a hitch at the end, like a doubled beat. I can feel it in my teeth. If you start feeling pressure behind your eyes when the glow hits, break line of sight. Go to an interior room. I've got a hunch that what's coming through is more than light. For anyone still close to the eastern roads, I'm going to repeat what I've been told 3 times tonight. The guard isn't trying to keep you safe from what's inside. They're trying to keep it from finding you. The vehicles facing outwards make more sense if you think of it that way. You're the perimeter now. At 3:15, I'll throw the AM thump on 8:20. After that, I'm going to keep scanning for whoever called in from Twin Arrows. If they come back on, I'll patch them through live. Until then, stay in the shadows, keep your radios low, and if you see movement in light that isn't yours, turn away before it sees you back. This is Jason Tate, KILN 103.9 FM. We're still west. We're still watching. And if the oval in the sky grows any longer, I'll be back before 4. It's 4:02 a.m., and the diesel's rattling with that hollow knock it gets when the tank's running more on fumes than liquid. I've got a spare 5-gallon in the corner, but I'm holding off on pouring it in until I see if we make it through the next hour. The less time I spend with that back door open, the better. Every time I crack it now, I swear the air outside feels like it's pressing inward, heavier than it should be at this altitude. The glow to the east has flattened, like it's pressing low against the horizon instead of rising straight up. That oval patch where the stars used to vanish is still there, but it's begun to rotate. Slow enough that you wouldn't notice, unless you mark it against the fixed stars. I've been checking every 20 minutes, and the shift is real. It's clockwise, and the edges aren't as sharp anymore. They're fraying, like ink bleeding into paper. About an hour ago, just after I threw the AM thump, I caught a signal spike on the scanner. Short burst, not voice, more like a string of tones. They weren't random. I matched them against the pattern I logged on day 1, the one that lined up too neatly to be static. It's similar, but the spacing is different, almost doubled. If it's a code, they're saying more now than they did before. If you're recording these and you've got the patience, see if it matches anything in old marine or aviation signal libraries. My gut says it doesn't. I got a visit just before the generator cooldown from 2 brothers out of Bellamont, Jesse and Nate. They've been riding the perimeter roads on dirt bikes, using back trails the guard either doesn't know or doesn't care to block. They say there are new checkpoints going up, but they're not manned by the guard anymore. No uniforms, just people standing in the road at night, waving lights low to the ground like they're guiding traffic. Jesse swears he saw one lean down to the road and press its hand flat against the asphalt, and the light from the crater pulsed a heartbeat later. They didn't stop to see what happened next. Closer in, people are talking about the hum. I didn't notice it myself until I shut the generator off last hour, but it's there, faint, steady, deep enough you feel it in your jaw. It's not coming from the station. I walked into the parking lot and it was louder out there. Might be riding the ground, or the air, or both. If you hear it in your walls, don't try to match it with your breathing. Break the rhythm. Hum something offbeat. Tap your foot in 5s instead of 4s. I've heard too many stories of people falling into step with it and not realizing they've walked out into the street. One more thing. And it's not going to sit well. A rancher east of Loip reported that his cattle, the ones still alive, are clustering against the western fence lines now. Not grazing, just standing there, all facing the same way. He says the ones that were closest to the crater 2 nights ago are gone. No blood, no tracks leading out. Just gone. We're on a countdown here. The diesel will need that last can soon, and when it does, I'll have to risk the back door. If I cut out for more than 5 minutes, that's why. Until then, I'll keep this signal running low and steady. If you're out there listening, keep your eyes off that oval in the sky. Keep your ears off the hum. And remember, the only way it gets to you is if you give it a way in. This is Jason Tate, KILN 103.9 FM west of the crater, still talking while the fuel holds. If the shape in the sky turns faster, I'll break in before 5. It's 5:07 a.m., and the eastern horizon has stopped pretending to be a sunrise. That glow, it's not warm anymore. It's gone pale, almost metallic, like light reflected off dull steel. The oval's rotation is sped up. I clocked it against Orion's belt, and it shifted nearly a quarter in the last hour. That might not sound like much, but for something that size, that far up, it's fast. The hum is louder now. I can feel it in my chest without even trying. The coffee cup on the desk has a ripple in it, like a glass of water on a movie set before the monster shows up. That's not an exaggeration. It's constant, steady, and it's making my teeth ache. No new tone bursts on the scanner, but the static's different. There's a layering to it, like someone's whispering under the white noise. I boosted the gain, and all it did was make my skin crawl. Not because I could understand it, but because I couldn't. You get the sense that if you did understand it, you wouldn't want to. I've been trying to keep my own head straight by reading listener notes. One came in on paper, hand-delivered by the Belmont brothers before they left. It's from a woman named Renee who says she's been hearing the hum in her sleep for weeks, long before the crater ever appeared. She drew a map of the old aquifer lines under Coconino County and shaded in areas where she hears it strongest. The lines run straight toward the crater's center. There's movement closer in. Not vehicles. Shadows against the glow, moving along the rim like they're tracing it. Too far to make out details, but they're tall, and they move as if they know exactly where to place each step. I counted 5, then 6. Then they all stopped at once, like they'd been given the same order. Jesse and Nate left me a warning before they rode off. They said if I have to go outside to refuel, keep one hand on metal. Doesn't matter what. The tank, the door frame, the station's siding. They claim it grounds you, keeps you from feeling the pull to walk toward the glow. I don't know if that's superstition or something they've seen work, but I'm not ruling anything out. Fuel's low enough that I'll have to make that run before dawn's full, if you can even call what's coming dawn. If the signal cuts, count to 300. If I'm not back by then, mark it down. 5:30 a.m. last broadcast from KILN. Until then, stay in the dark, stay off the hum's rhythm, and whatever you do, don't meet the glow with both eyes. 5:19 a.m. I've got the canisters slung over one shoulder and the rifle over the other. The metal siding of the station is cold enough to bite through my gloves. I keep my palm on it anyway, just like Jesse said. The hum's different out here, sharper, like it's threading right through my skull. The air tastes wrong. Not metallic, not burnt. More like when you open an old cellar that's been sealed for decades. Damp, heavy, and layered with something faintly sweet. It's hard to breathe without feeling like it's coating the inside of your throat. The glow rises behind the tree line like a second horizon. Every time I glance toward it, it feels closer. I'm trying not to, but the reflection catches in the station windows and in the sheen on the fuel canisters. No matter where I look, it's there, bending its way into my peripheral. Halfway to the tanks, I hear gravel shift. Not behind me, not ahead, somewhere off to my right, in the ditch along the access road. I freeze, hand still on the siding. The movement stops, but the hum gets louder, and that's worse. I start moving again, slower this time. 1 step, pause. 2 steps. Something mirrors me, keeping pace in the ditch. When I reach the tanks, I crouch low, metal under my hand, and start working the valve. The fuel splashes into the canister with a sound that's too loud in the stillness. That's when I see it, not in the ditch, but across the field. A figure, taller than any man I've seen. Thin, all angles, like it's stretched. It doesn't move like it's walking. It sort of adjusts. Like each position it takes is the only one it's ever been in, until it changes to the next. The hum spikes each time it shifts. I cap the canister and move for the second tank, but my gloves slip on the valve. That's when I hear the first whisper. Not from the figure, from right inside my ear. My own voice, but wrong. Slower. Like I'm speaking through water. It's telling me to look at the glow. I don't. I grab the second canister, keep my hand on the siding, and back toward the station without turning away from the field. The figure tilts its head as if it's studying me. Then it's just gone. Not like it left, but like the space it took up doesn't exist anymore. I'm back inside now, doors barred, fuel in place. My hands won't stop shaking. If you're still listening, remember, it's not just the light that'll pull you in. It's the sound. 5:42 a.m. The cans are lined up by the generator, but I haven't poured them yet. I keep checking the doors, even though I bolted them twice. The whisper's gone quiet. For now. That's worse somehow. It's like waiting for a radio to come back on after static, knowing it'll pick up mid-sentence. The hum isn't outside anymore. It's in the walls. I press my ear to the paneling and feel it vibrate in my teeth. Every few seconds, it dips low, then surges like a wave rolling through metal. Then, faint, just under that sound, a voice. Not my voice this time. Closer. It's so soft, I'm not sure I didn't imagine it. But then it says it again. Same word, same tone, as if it's patient and doesn't need to shout. I glance toward the east wall, the one facing the glow. There's a faint line of condensation running down the paint. I wipe it with my glove, and my stomach turns. It's not condensation. It's the paint bulging, just barely, like the wall is breathing. I back away, slow. My boots scuff the floor. The voice changes, shifting pitch like a dial being turned. For a moment, it's Jesse's voice. Then it's my father's, the way he sounded when I was 8. Then it's something I've never heard before. A wet, dragging rasp. I light the stove for tea just to break the silence, but the sound doesn't help. The flames flicker too much, like there's a draft where there shouldn't be. And then, 3 knocks. Not from the door, from the wall itself, low to the ground, like someone's crouched on the other side. I grab the rifle, but I can't make myself get close enough to check. The knocks come again, perfectly spaced, and I swear I hear breathing under them. If it can knock, maybe it can get through. I'm shutting down the broadcast for now, but if you hear the hum in your own walls, don't answer. 6:09 a.m. The third knock never came. That's how I knew it wasn't done. It was listening. I kept the rifle up and the stove flame low. I could feel my own breath in the air. Too loud, too warm. The bulge in the wall had stilled, but the paint looked stretched, taut like skin under strain. Every few seconds the surface shimmered as if something just beneath it was shifting position. Then it inhaled. Not air. It pulled sound. The room fell hollow, as if someone had cut out the noise of the generator, the stove, even the ringing in my own ears. All that was left was the thin scrape of my heartbeat, and even that felt too slow. The first tear appeared near the baseboard, a hairline split running vertical, widening with the faintest wet crackle. White paint flaked away, revealing something not wood, not drywall. A surface that glistened like it had been grown, not built. And then it stepped through. It didn't bend or crawl. The wall moved for it, folding itself around its shoulders, peeling back like paper in water. The shape was human only in outline, too tall, too still. Its head tilted, eyes reflecting nothing, as if they absorbed light instead of giving it back. No footsteps, just the sound of the paint closing behind it, sealing shut without a seam. It didn't reach for me. It didn't speak. It only stood, head cocked, as though I'd been the one knocking all along. I don't remember lowering the rifle. I don't remember sitting down. But when I blinked, it was closer, filling more of the room, blocking the door. I think it's waiting for me to ask. 6:15 a.m. The first knock didn't sound like wood. It didn't sound like metal either. It was deeper than that. A pressure in the air that punched through my chest and made the lights overhead flicker once, twice, then dim to a warm, unnatural glow. The creature, if it was a creature, froze in place. Not because it was startled, but because it was listening. The way you'd lean in to catch the last words of a dying man. I could hear it too. Not the knock anymore, but the echo of the knock. It didn't bounce around the room like normal sound. It spread, curling along the edges of my vision, bleeding into the corners where shadow should have been but wasn't. Outside the window, the street had changed. The asphalt was slick now, not with rain but with something that caught the light in waves, as if the ground itself had grown skin. The houses opposite mine weren't quite where they should be. Their angles tilted, their roofs bending as if the horizon had started to sag. The thing's voice came again, quieter than before, but every word landed heavy in my chest. That was not the knock. That was a knock. I asked the difference, but my throat felt thick, the air slow and syrupy. The knock is an invitation, it continued, but only the right one opens the fold. I glanced back toward the window. Shapes were moving now in the distance, tall, spindly silhouettes that swayed like kelp in deep water. The light above each street lamp flickered in rhythm with their movements, as if they were pulling it in and releasing it again. The thing in my room turned its head toward me for the first time. Its face, if it could be called that, was an absence, a cutout in the shape of a person's head, with the wrong depth behind it. When the right knock comes, it said, there will be no difference between here and there. Another knock came, louder this time, and I realized it wasn't coming from the wall. It was coming from inside my own head. 6:17 a.m. The third knock didn't hit like sound anymore. It pulled. It yanked something loose in me, the way a deep undertow catches your feet before you even realize the tide's shifted. I staggered, and for a second, my living room wasn't my living room. The carpet under my bare feet had become slick, cold, and faintly ridged, like I was standing on the back of something alive. The walls leaned away from each other, as if the house itself was trying to avoid being here. The creature, that shadow with a cutout where a face should be, didn't move closer, but somehow it was closer. The gap where its face should have been now held motion, like looking through a hole into somewhere else. I could see a street in there, not my street, but a reflection of it, except the lampposts were bent into spirals, and the houses breathed in and out like lungs. You're slipping, it said. That's good. It makes you easier to carry. I wanted to ask where it meant to carry me, but I didn't have to, because I could feel the answer. Not as words, but as a deep, sinking certainty. Away from here. Behind the thing, my front door was no longer wood and paint. It was black glass, with faint shapes pressing against it from the other side. Some were tall and narrow. Others dragged themselves upward like they had too many joints in the wrong places. Their faces were blank and smooth, but if I stared too long, I swore I saw my own mouth moving on one of them, as if it had borrowed it from a memory I didn't want to revisit. Another knock came. This one didn't even pretend to be in the air. It struck directly in my chest, and my vision folded inward like looking down two mirrors reflecting into infinity. The creature leaned just enough for the edges of its face to sharpen into something like a grin. That one was closer. The shapes behind the glass began pressing harder. The pane bulged inward like stretched plastic, trembling, but not yet breaking. 6:18 a.m. The black glass gave way without shattering. It just sank, like a curtain melting into liquid, spilling inward in slow folds. The shapes on the other side didn't leap through. They bled through, stretching like shadows caught in syrup. The first one to emerge didn't have edges. It was a blur of joints and limbs that never settled on a single arrangement, every movement slow but deliberate, as if it was testing gravity. Its head, if that's what it was, pivoted toward me without turning, like the idea of movement reached me before the motion itself. The thing that had been knocking stepped aside to let the others in. I realized then, it wasn't the host of this place. It was just the herald. "You've been seen," it said. "Once you've been seen, you can't go back." The second figure through the glass was worse. It looked like someone had made a person from memory, but the memory was wrong. Two long arms, hands with fingers that curled backward toward the wrist, a mouth that smiled too wide but was missing its center. Where its eyes should have been, there were only flat, dark ovals, the way oil looks when it's pooling over water. They didn't touch me. They didn't have to. The air inside the house turned heavy, wet, like it was being poured from somewhere else. My lungs began to ache, and every inhale carried a faint whisper. Not words, just recognition. They knew me. Not in a friendly way, in the way a predator knows the shape of what it's about to consume. The herald stepped closer again. Its face tilted, and for a moment the whole showed my living room exactly as it was, clean, familiar, warm, but with no me in it. "This," it said, "is what the room will look like tomorrow." Behind it, the wrong-limbed things moved closer, and I realized they weren't coming for my body. They were after the version of me that still believed I lived here. 6:19 a.m. It happened faster than I could brace for, but somehow felt stretched out, like a nightmare where every detail burns into you even as it unravels. The first wrong-limbed shape reached into my chest without touching me. My skin didn't break, my ribs didn't move, but my breath caught, as though something vital had been plucked from the middle of it. And there it was. Me. Not my body, not my mind, but the version of me that still believed in this place, in my life as it had been. It was pale and flickering, like a home video paused on an old TV, its edges fraying with static. It looked at me like I'd betrayed it by opening the door. The herald tilted its head, and the flickering me was drawn toward that molten black glass. I tried to grab it, but my hand slid through it like it was made of smoke. The moment it passed through the threshold, the house shifted. The framed photos on the wall still hung in their places, but now they showed empty rooms instead of birthdays or holidays. The couch where I'd slept through storms was just a strip of shadow against the floor. My phone, still on the counter, lit up with the lock screen, but the name was gone. Just device. "This is what it looks like without you," the herald said. And here's the part I can't explain. I was still standing there, breathing, thinking. But something in the walls, in the air, in the layout itself no longer recognized me as part of it, like the house had unlearned me. That's when the others started stepping closer, and I understood. Once the place forgot me, I wasn't safe here anymore. 6:42 a.m. I stepped outside, thinking maybe if I just kept moving, I could outrun whatever was happening inside that house. The morning light felt wrong, too thin, too silver, like it had been filtered through dust that wasn't there. The street still had the same cracked sidewalks, the same sagging power lines, the same rows of houses leaning in the way they always had. But their windows were different. No curtains, no reflections. Just a uniform, dull gray, like the glass had been replaced with wet cement. Mrs. Kessler's house was first. I'd known her since I was a kid. She used to wave from her porch while feeding stray cats. This morning, her porch was there, her rocking chair still rocking lightly in the breeze, but the chair was empty, and the motion was too steady, too mechanical, as if something unseen was keeping it moving out of habit. When I looked toward the next house, my stomach dropped. The nameplates, those little metal ones people nail beside the door, were blank. Every single one. Even the old rusted ones that hadn't been touched in decades. I started walking faster, looking for anyone, but the farther I went, the more the world smoothed itself out. Yard decorations vanished. Driveways lost their oil stains. The old dented mailbox at the end of the corner lot was just gone, replaced by a perfectly smooth post that didn't even have a slot. By the time I reached the intersection, I realized the street signs were missing too. Not vandalized, just never there in the first place. And then I saw the people. They were moving in the distance, walking along the far side of the road, but none of them were looking around. None of them were talking. Their faces were too plain, blank where details should be, as if someone had drawn them from memory but never finished shading them in. The worst part? One of them was wearing my jacket, the old one with the coffee stain on the left sleeve. 6:44 a.m. I didn't mean to call out. It just slipped out, my voice breaking the stillness. A single word. "Hey!" Every single head turned at once. No hesitation, no delay, like I'd hit a switch and they'd all been waiting for it. Their faces weren't really faces at all. From a distance they'd seemed unfinished, but up close it was worse. They were too smooth. No wrinkles, no lines, no marks of living. Just pale, stretched skin that bent in all the right places without having any of the right details. The one in my jacket tilted his head. Not like a curious dog, more like someone trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. A slow, mechanical calculation. Then, as if pulled by invisible strings, they began walking toward me in perfect unison. No footsteps out of sync, no swaying arms, no sound but the faint hiss of fabric moving. My phone was in my hand before I even realized it. I didn't open the camera, didn't dial anyone. I just stared at the black screen. It didn't reflect me. It reflected them. Closer now. closer than I wanted to believe. And somewhere behind them, far down the street, I saw the horizon ripple. The houses were folding in on themselves, not collapsing, but flattening, like someone was pressing their fingers into wet clay and smoothing everything out. The herald had said the first sign would be recognition, that the world would notice you noticing it. I just made that mistake. 6:45 a.m. The first one to reach me was the one in my jacket. Up close, I could see the stitching along the shoulder. One thread loose, curling like a tiny question mark. I knew that loose thread. I'd been meaning to cut it for weeks. It wasn't a copy. It was mine, my jacket, my scent, my warmth still in the lining. The figure stopped a foot away. No breath, no heat radiating from the body inside. Just stillness, like it had been carved from something that used to be alive. I forced myself to speak, though my voice came out thin. Where? Did you get that? Its head tilted again, sharper this time. A motion without muscle, without effort, like gravity had been altered just for that single movement. And then it smiled. The smile didn't rise from the mouth. It started in the cheeks, pulling upward too far, stretching the skin until it seemed translucent at the edges. Teeth, too even, too white, like they'd been printed rather than grown, flashed in the half-light. Behind it, the others had stopped walking. They stood perfectly still, their eyes, if you could call them eyes, fixed on me. Flat, unblinking, glassy discs, the exact shade of early morning frost. I realized then what was wrong with the street. It wasn't just silent. It was empty. No wind. No creak of branches, no sound of the city waking up. Even the air on my skin felt, paused, like the whole world had been told to wait. The one in my jacket leaned forward, so close that the pale skin on its face reflected my own trembling in miniature. Trade, it whispered. Not a voice. More like a sound made from my own breath, replayed back at me. I didn't ask what it wanted to trade. I already knew. Because I could see it now, over its shoulder, at the far end of the street. Me. Standing there, wearing my face, my expression, my eyes wide in the exact same fear. And it was smiling too. 6:46 a.m. The one in my jacket shifted just enough to let the other me pass, like it was yielding the right of way in some grotesque, silent ritual. And there I was, only a few yards away now, moving toward myself with slow, steady steps, like someone taking care not to wake a sleeping animal. Every detail matched. The scuff on my left boot, the way my right shoulder dipped slightly from years of carrying heavy bags, even the faint line across my forehead that only shows when I'm thinking too hard. But the eyes, they weren't mine. They were too dark, like all the light had been pulled into them and drowned. They didn't just look at me. They weighed me, the way a hand presses down on something to see how much it can take before it breaks. I wanted to step back. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to step back. But my feet stayed planted, locked in place as if the pavement had closed over them. When it reached me, it didn't stop at arm's length. It kept walking until we were chest to chest, our faces inches apart. I could see my own breath fogging between us, but none came from it. It raised one hand, my hand. Same lines, same scars, even the faint ink smudge from the pen I'd used yesterday. And then it pressed that hand to my face. The cold was instant. Not the kind that burns, but the kind that empties. My thoughts felt slower, like they were drifting toward the edges of my skull instead of staying in the center. My own reflection smiled down at me, the same wrong smile the one in my jacket had shown. Behind us, I heard the rest of them start walking again. Slow, deliberate, as though they were already certain I wouldn't run. Because maybe I wasn't supposed to anymore. 6:48 a.m. It didn't take my hand or shove me forward. There was no force like that. It just turned its back to me and started walking. And somehow my legs followed. The sound of my boots on the pavement was wrong, hollow, like I was walking across something thin, stretched tight, and if I stamped too hard, my foot would punch straight through into whatever was underneath. The street should have been familiar. Same cracked sidewalks, same rusted street lamps, same sagging telephone wires. But every time I blinked, something had shifted. Houses no longer sat at right angles to the road. They leaned slightly inward, like they were bending down to hear what was happening. Mailboxes turned to face me, the metal flaps hanging open like mouths. Behind me, the rest of them walked in that steady, measured way. I didn't need to look. I knew they were all versions of me, dozens, maybe more, each wearing different scars, different clothes, but all carrying that same stillness. Up ahead, the asphalt began to ripple. Not like heat waves. This was slower, thicker. The lines on the road bent into curves that didn't make sense, drawing shapes I couldn't follow. I tried to focus on one of them, but the moment I did, my eyes slid away as if my brain refused to understand it. We passed under a street lamp, and for the first time I noticed there was no light coming from it. Instead, something was hanging inside the glass. Not a bulb, something curled, pale, and breathing slowly, like it was asleep. My double kept walking, and I wanted to stop. I wanted to turn around, but every step I took felt less like a choice and more like a continuation of something I'd already agreed to without realizing it. I glanced down at the cracked sidewalk and realized the cracks weren't random anymore. They were forming letters, words. They spelled my name, over and over, and each time it appeared, the letters were larger. 6:51 a.m. The letters in the cracks stopped being part of the sidewalk. Somewhere between the last step and this one, they'd begun rising. Thin ridges of stone, curling upward like something trying to climb out from beneath the concrete. My name was no longer flat. It was standing. And the taller the letters got, the more they leaned toward the center of the road, forming a kind of corridor. The air inside that corridor was different. Heavy, not just with humidity, but with attention. I could feel the weight of something watching from all sides, though the houses remained silent and the drawn curtains stayed perfectly still. Up ahead, at the far end of the stone letter tunnel, there was a figure. It wasn't moving, but even from here I could see it was wrong. The shape was human at first glance, but the head seemed too still, too fixed. The arms hung in a way that didn't make sense, the elbows bending ever so slightly the wrong way. I couldn't see its face, but I didn't need to. Something inside me knew it was already looking directly at me, not with eyes, but with the same presence that had been tugging me along since this all began. My double kept walking toward it without hesitation. The others, those endless versions of me, followed in perfect rhythm, their footsteps making no sound now. I realized mine didn't either. That was the moment my heart started pounding. Not because I was afraid of the figure ahead, but because I realized I hadn't heard my own breath since I'd entered this corridor. And when I tried to breathe in, the air didn't move. was then I understood. This wasn't just a path. This was procession, and I was no longer walking toward that figure. I was being delivered. 6:53 a.m. The corridor of stone letters narrowed as I drew closer, the edges brushing my shoulders even though I hadn't changed direction. Each letter was warm now, fever warm, as if they'd been sitting in the sun for hours, though the sky above was still gray and without a sun at all. The figure ahead hadn't moved, or maybe it had, in increments so small I couldn't see, because the space between us felt shorter with each blink. My double reached it first. I expected some kind of contact, an embrace, a handshake, even violence. But instead, the double simply stopped in front of the figure. The two of them stood there, unmoving, like statues in a dim museum hall. I felt a pull in my chest, subtle at first, then sharp, like a hook sinking in. My feet kept walking me forward, even though every part of me screamed to stop. The pull wasn't from the figure. It was through it. Something beyond. Something deeper. When I was close enough to make out the details, I realized the figure had no face. Not in the way a mask is blank, but in the way a wall is blank. Smooth, featureless, without the possibility of eyes or a mouth. And yet, the longer I looked, the more I recognized it. Not because I'd seen it before, but because I'd felt it. In the half-second before falling asleep. In the pause between hearing your name and turning around. In the way shadows sometimes align just right to make you think someone's standing behind you. This thing was that. The shape behind the moments. The weight in the room when you're alone. Its head tilted, not with motion, but with decision. The letters on either side of me split and crumbled, falling away into nothing, and the corridor dissolved. We were standing in open space now, just me, my double, and it. Somewhere, far off, a sound began, like paper tearing, slow and deliberate. 6:54 a.m. The sound kept stretching, peeling the world open like an old envelope that had been sealed for far too long. At first, I thought it was the sky tearing, a childish image, but the only one that fit, until I realized the sky was gone. Above us wasn't air, or even the gray I'd grown used to. It was paper. Not smooth paper, but layered, thick, fibrous sheets, stacked like ancient manuscripts pressed together over centuries. And now, something was pulling them apart, strip by strip. The light that bled through the tears wasn't sunlight. It wasn't gold or white or even warm. It was the color of bone. Wet bone. Like something pulled straight from the inside of a body. It made my stomach turn just to see it. The figure with no face didn't move, but my double did. It looked up, hands twitching slightly, like someone listening to a melody only they could hear. Then, without looking at me, it stepped backward toward the figure. 1, 2, 3 steps, until their shapes almost overlapped. The tearing grew louder, and I could feel wind now, except it wasn't air rushing in, it was memory. Not mine. Not all mine, at least. Every gust brought flashes. A child's shoe sinking in mud, a row of hospital beds under dim blue lights, a woman turning to smile and then realizing she was alone. I staggered. It was like my head had been cracked open, and someone was pouring in a history I'd never lived. The faceless figure tilted again, and this time I could feel it inviting me forward, though inviting wasn't the right word. It was the kind of pull a cliff gives you when you stand too close to the edge. The sound overhead reached a pitch so high it stopped being sound and became pressure. The paper sky split wide enough for something to look through. And I swear, for just an instant, it looked exactly like me. 6:55 a.m. It didn't blink. It didn't need to. The other me, peering down through that ragged tear in the sky, didn't move the way a body should. There was no shift of breath, no tiny tremor of muscle, no flicker of uncertainty in the eyes. It was like a still photograph that someone had bent into 3 dimensions and set above the world. But I could feel it thinking. Not in words, more like the slow, spreading burn of a fever, pressing outward in every direction. Its gaze wasn't fixed on my face. It was on my outline, tracing it, measuring it, like it was checking if it could fit inside. The pull got worse. It wasn't just my feet edging forward now. My bones felt lighter, my skin too thin, like something in me was rising toward the gap, whether I let it or not. I dug my nails into my palms, hard enough to hurt, just to remind myself where I was. The figure with no face hadn't moved an inch. Neither had my double beside it, the one that was in my world, but I could see them both vibrating faintly at the edges, as though the tearing above had loosened their boundaries. Like one good gust might blow them into something entirely different. Then, without warning, the other me above the tear leaned closer, and I saw its mouth. It wasn't there a moment before. It opened slowly, as if the skin had to learn how to split. And though no sound came out, I heard the words in the marrow of my bones. Not yet. The sky stitched itself shut with a wet, shivering sound. The wind stopped. Everything went still. And in the silence, I realized my hands were empty. Something I'd been holding, something I should have remembered, was gone. 6:55 a.m. It didn't blink. It didn't need to. The other me, peering down through that ragged tear in the sky, didn't move the way a body should. There was no shift of breath, no tiny tremor of muscle, no flicker of uncertainty in the eyes. It was like a still photograph that someone had bent into 3 dimensions and set above the world. But I could feel it thinking, not in words, more like the slow, spreading burn of a fever, pressing outward in every direction. Its gaze wasn't fixed on my face. It was on my outline, tracing it, measuring it, like it was checking if it could fit inside. The pull got worse. It wasn't just my feet edging forward now. My bones felt lighter, my skin too thin, like something in me was rising toward the gap, whether I let it or not. I dug my nails into my palms, hard enough to hurt, just to remind myself where I was. The figure with no face hadn't moved an inch. Neither had my double beside it, the one that was in my world, but I could see them both vibrating faintly at the edges, as though the tearing above had loosened their boundaries. Like one good gust might blow them into something entirely different. Then, without warning, the other me above the tear leaned closer, and I saw its mouth. It wasn't there a moment before. It opened slowly, as if the skin had to learn how to split. And though no sound came out, I heard the words in the marrow of my bones. Not yet. The sky stitched itself shut with a wet, shivering sound. The wind stopped. Everything went still. And in the silence, I realized my hands were empty. Something I'd been holding, something I should have remembered, was gone. 7:14 a.m. At first, it was just an itch in my thoughts, like waking up knowing you forgot a dream that mattered. But as I stood there, staring at the spot where the tear in the sky had been, the itch sharpened into a cold, certain absence. I reached into my coat pocket. Empty. No. Wrong. Not empty. There was lint, a folded scrap of paper, a key I didn't recognize. But none of it belonged to me. My hand went to my chest, then my belt, then every other place I'd stashed something important over the years. Gone. The memory of it was slippery, refusing to take shape. I couldn't see it, couldn't even name it. But my body knew the space it had once filled. It was the kind of loss that pressed into your ribs and stayed there. I turned in a slow circle, scanning the frost-quiet street. Nothing stirred, no witnesses, no signs, no them, and yet, every shadow felt heavier, as though it had swallowed more than just the absence of light. Somewhere in the pit of my skull, I felt that whisper again. Not a voice, not exactly. Just a thought that wasn't mine, curling through the hollow it had left behind. We'll hold it for you. I didn't know what it was, but I knew if I didn't get it back, I wouldn't stay myself for much longer. 7:42 a.m. The frost had started to melt into thin, glistening threads along the gutter. Not because the sun was stronger, but because the air itself felt warmer. Wrong warm. Like standing too close to a light bulb that hums. I walked, not fast, just enough to keep the blood moving, enough to keep the silence from settling too heavy in my ears. The streets were emptier than they should have been for this hour. No delivery vans, no garbage trucks, no stray dogs rooting in bins. Just shuttered windows and the faint smell of metal, the way pennies taste when they sit too long on your tongue. The key in my pocket felt heavier with every block. I pulled it out again. Long, flat, unmarked brass. Not from my apartment. Not from anywhere I'd been. Its teeth were worn smooth, like it had been turning the same lock for decades. The paper was worse. A single line, handwritten in dark blue ink. Don't open it until they're gone. I stopped in the middle of an intersection. Every street around me bent ever so slightly inward, like the buildings were leaning, not toward each other, but toward me. And for a moment, I swore I saw the sky ripple above the rooftops. Whatever they'd taken, it wasn't just mine. It was something holding this place together, and without it, the city was already starting to fold in on itself. 7:46 a.m. The first sound wasn't footsteps, it was breathing. Not ragged or gasping. Steady, measured, like someone deliberately matching their inhale to mine. I froze on the curb, one foot hanging over the gutter, listening. It was close. Too close. Then, movement. A shadow, not cast by the sun, but by something taller than any street lamp here. It slid across the frost-slick pavement without a body to anchor it. When it stopped, the breathing stopped. I turned, slowly, toward the mouth of an alley. And there it was. Not a person, not even a shape you could comfortably name. A tall, segmented silhouette, each piece shifting slightly out of sync, like a deck of cards being fanned and shuffled over and over. And between those shifting slices, I could see pieces of what was behind it. Wall, sky, brick, reassembled wrong, like a puzzle forced together with the wrong edges touching. It didn't walk toward me. It unfolded. One moment, it was pressed thin between shadow and wall. The next, it occupied the space in front of me, closer than it should have been possible to move. My hand closed around the key in my pocket, and I realized why it felt so heavy. It wasn't made of brass at all. It was warm. Software. It pulsed, once, like a heartbeat. 7:49 a.m. It didn't speak, didn't make a sound, except for that breathing, which I now realized wasn't coming from it at all. It was coming from inside my own head, like my lungs had been hijacked, forced to move in rhythm with something else. I stepped back. It didn't. But the space between us shrank anyway. The buildings along the street seemed to lean inward as though they were curious witnesses. Windows darkened, shutters creaked shut. Somewhere a shop sign swayed on rusted chains, the screech of metal dragging through the air like fingernails over wet glass. I turned away, thinking I could simply walk, keep my pace steady, pretend I hadn't seen it. But each step forward was heavier than the last, like the ground beneath me had become a slow-moving tide, pulling me back toward the alley. At the corner, I made the mistake of looking over my shoulder. It was there, not behind me, not following in the normal sense. It was just there. One moment it occupied the alley. The next, it leaned from the shadow of a delivery truck farther up the street. Always the same distance from me, always facing me. I clutched the key tighter. The pulse inside it grew faster. And for the first time, I realized it was trying to warn me. 7:51 a.m. I tried the most human thing I could think of, pretend none of it was happening. People do that all the time when something's wrong. You tell yourself, just keep moving, don't look, don't acknowledge it, and it'll go away. So I crossed the street, didn't run, didn't hurry, just kept my eyes on the uneven sidewalk, stepping over cracks where weeds had pushed through, pretending the world was still stitched together. I could hear the city breathing in that strange, mismatched rhythm. The wind didn't move right. It curled back on itself, brushing my face twice in the same second. A streetlight flickered in the daylight, each blink timed perfectly with the quickening pulse in the key. I reached the next block and thought I'd finally made distance. The air loosened around me. The pressure in my chest eased. Then I saw it, leaning against the doorway of a shuttered diner. No movement, no expression. Just there, waiting. Its head tilted in that almost human way that made me want to tear my eyes away before I understood too much. I crossed again. It crossed without moving. I turned down a side street. It was already halfway down it, watching me. Every turn I took, every change of pace. There it was, not chasing, not approaching, just occupying the space I needed to go, as if the entire map of this neighborhood had been rearranged so that no matter where I aimed myself, it would be there first. That's when I realized the real trap wasn't the thing itself. It was the city. 8:03 a.m. I picked streets I knew by heart. The kind of streets you could navigate blindfolded. Corner bodega with the peeling beer sign. Bus stop with the graffiti nobody could cover. The brick wall where the ivy turned red every autumn. Only now they weren't in the right order. The bodega came twice. Once on my left, then again, less than a minute later, on my right. Same peeling sign. Same tilted trash can. Same old man behind the counter who didn't look up. I tried turning toward the sound of cars, figuring if I could reach a main road, I could orient myself again. But every time I reached the end of a block, the traffic noise shifted. Sometimes it was ahead of me, sometimes to my left, sometimes faintly behind, like it was circling too. The air started to feel crowded, even though the street was nearly empty. It wasn't just the key now, it was the buildings, leaning, imperceptibly, inward. I passed the bus stop for the third time and saw something new. My own reflection in the glass, except it didn't move when I did. It just stood there, head tilted at the same angle as the thing in the diner doorway. I stopped walking. The city didn't. Somewhere behind me, footsteps fell in time with my breath, not my steps, like whoever was making them wasn't walking toward me, but with me, synced to the rhythm inside my chest. That's when I realized the streets weren't looping. They were closing. 8:06 a.m. I didn't so much decide to run as my legs just went. One moment, I was standing there, watching my reflection not blink, and the next, my body was trying to break free before my mind could catch up. The first few strides felt normal, concrete slapping under my shoes, breath hitting cold in the back of my throat, but the corners came too fast. They didn't open into cross streets. They folded like paper, sending me back along the same stretch of sidewalk I'd just been on. The bodega, the bus stop, the brick wall, again, except each time I passed them, they looked older. More paint curling off the sign, more grime clouding the bus stop glass. The ivy on the wall was black now, curling away from the bricks like it had been burned. I kept running. Faster. My lungs were tearing themselves apart, my heartbeat deafening in my ears. The traffic noise was gone now. No cars. No hum of the city. Just the sound of those footsteps. Not behind me. Not in front. Inside. Like they were being made in my chest cavity, pacing the hollow where my heart should have been. And then I saw it. The diner again. Only this time the doorway was wide open, dark as a cave, and the thing in it stepped forward. It wasn't a shape you could name. It was the absence of shape, bending the light wrong, so every time my eyes tried to fix on it, the street behind it seemed to warp. It raised its hand, and the key in my pocket moved. 8:07 a.m. The first thing I felt wasn't fear, it was weight. Like my pocket had just been filled with lead, dragging at the fabric, pulling my hip toward the ground. The key was thrumming through the denim, each pulse matching the beat of my heart, but heavier, slower, as if it were trying to set the rhythm instead of follow it. I didn't take it out, not at first. Some part of me already knew that touching it now would be the same as shaking hands with whatever stood in the diner doorway. The figure didn't move toward me. It didn't have to. Its presence spread outward like smoke filling a room, swallowing the space between us without taking a single step. The air got thicker. Each breath felt like trying to drink syrup. Streetlights flickered even though it was morning, their yellow glow struggling against an unseen eclipse. And then, softly, my name. Not shouted, not whispered, spoken like it was being remembered. I couldn't stop myself. My hand slipped into my pocket, closed around the key. It was warm now, warmer than skin should ever be. The metal flexed slightly, like it had muscle. When I pulled it out, I realized it wasn't the same dull brass as before. Its surface rippled with faint, shifting patterns, like oil over water, except the colors were wrong. Colors I didn't have names for. The figure tilted its head, and I understood without being told that I had just accepted something. Not a gift, not a bargain, a role.